In the shadowed halls of Ravenwood Manor, a brutal murder shatters the night. Lord Reginald Ashford stabbed in his locked study, a cryptic note reading trust beside him. Enter Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective with his razor-sharp mind, and Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal but ambitious friend, determined to prove he's more than a sidekick. As footsteps echo, alibis crumble, and secrets unravel. Stolen inheritances, hidden letters, and a missing key. Hastings chases his prime suspect, Victor Crane, while Poirot weaves a subtler trap. In this deadly game of wits, where everyone hides a motive, who will unmask the killer first? The master detective or the man stepping out of his shadow? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Ravenwood Manor. The late afternoon sun cast a golden haze over the rolling hills of the English countryside, painting the fields in hues of amber and green. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated comfortably in the passenger seat of a sleek black Daimler, adjusted his tie and glanced at his companion Hercule Poirot. The little Belgian detective, with his impeccably waxed mustache and a glint of curiosity in his sharp green eyes, was studying a cream-colored envelope with an intensity that suggested it held the secrets of the universe. "Really, Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "you've been staring at that invitation for the better part of an hour. It's just a weekend in the country, not a coded message from a spy ring." Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile, though his eyes remained fixed on the elegant script adorning the envelope. "Mon ami, you see an invitation, but Hercule Poirot, he sees a puzzle. The words, they are chosen with care, n'est-ce pas? There is how do you say, an undertone of urgency beneath the politeness." Hastings chuckled, shaking his head. "You're incorrigible. It's a house party at Ravenwood Manor, not a crime scene. Lord Ashford probably just wants to show off his estate. I hear it's quite grand. Acres of gardens, a library to rival the British Museum, and a cellar stocked with the finest wines." Poirot folded the invitation and slipped it into his waistcoat pocket, his movements precise. "Perhaps, Hastings, but why does Lord Reginald Ashford, a man known for his reclusiveness, suddenly invite a detective of my reputation to his home? And you, my dear friend, as my companion? Non, there is more here than meets the eye." Daimler slowed as it approached a set of wrought iron gates flanked by stone pillars topped with carved lions. Beyond the gates, a gravel drive wound through manicured lawns toward Ravenwood Manor, a sprawling Georgian edifice of red brick and white trim, its windows glinting in the fading light. Hastings let out a low whistle. "I say, that's quite the sight. Makes my flat in London look like a broom cupboard." The car crunched to a stop before the manor's grand entrance, where a liveried footman awaited. As they stepped out, the cool autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Poirot adjusted his hat, his posture as immaculate as ever, while Hastings stretched his legs, grateful for the chance to escape the confines of the car. Tall, stately woman emerged from the double doors, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon. She wore a deep green dress that shimmered faintly in the twilight, and her smile was warm but measured. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "I am Lady Eleanor Ashford. Welcome to Ravenwood Manor. My husband, Lord Ashford, is indisposed but will join us for dinner." Poirot bowed, his mustache quivering slightly. "Madame, it is a pleasure. Hercule Poirot is most grateful for your hospitality." "Hastings ever." The gentleman offered a polite nod. "Delighted to be here, Lady Ashford. It's a splendid place you've got." Lady Eleanor's smile widened, though her eyes flickered with something Hastings couldn't quite place. Nervousness, perhaps. "Thank you, Captain. Please come inside. The other guests are eager to meet you." They followed her into a cavernous hall, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors and gilded mirrors that reflected the glow of a crystal chandelier. A grand staircase swept upward, its banister polished to a mirror-like sheen. Hastings couldn't help but feel a thrill of anticipation. This was the sort of setting where adventures began, though he hoped this one would involve more champagne than corpses. Lady Eleanor led them to a drawing room where a fire crackled in a massive hearth. The room was a study in opulence, velvet drapes, mahogany furniture, and a Persian rug that looked as though it cost more than Hastings' annual income. 4 other guests awaited, their conversations pausing as Poirot and Hastings entered. "Allow me to introduce our company," Lady Eleanor said, gesturing gracefully. "This is Mr. Victor Crane, a business associate of my husband's." A broad-shouldered man in his 40s with slicked-back hair and a suit that screamed new money rose from an armchair. He extended a hand, his grip firm to the point of discomfort. "Pleasure, gents. Heard of you, Poirot. Quite the reputation for sniffing out trouble." Poirot inclined his head, unruffled. "Monsieur Crane, I assure you I seek only the truth, not trouble." Next, Lady Eleanor indicated a young woman lounging on a settee, her blonde curls cascading over a crimson gown that left little to the imagination. "Miss Clara Beaumont, the celebrated actress." Clara flashed a dazzling smile, her eyes lingering on Hastings a touch longer than necessary. "Charmed, I'm sure," she purred, her voice carrying a theatrical lilt. Hastings felt his cheeks warm and quickly looked away, earning a knowing glance from Poirot. "And Dr. Harold Grayson?" Lady Eleanor continued, nodding toward a lean man standing by the window, his spectacles glinting in the firelight. He was older, perhaps 50, with a reserved demeanor and a tendency to clasp his hands behind his back. "Our family physician and a dear friend." Dr. Grayson offered a curt nod. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I trust your journey was pleasant?" "Most pleasant," Poirot replied, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied the doctor. Finally, Lady Eleanor gestured to a young woman seated quietly in a corner, her hands folded in her lap. "And my niece, Miss Emily Ashford." Emily, a pale, delicate girl of perhaps 20, looked up with wide, anxious eyes. Her mousy brown hair was pulled back simply, and her dress was modest compared to Clara's extravagance. "Hello," she stammered, barely audible. Hastings felt a pang of sympathy for the girl, who seemed out of place among the manor's grandeur. He offered her a reassuring smile, which she returned hesitantly. As the group exchanged pleasantries, the butler announced that dinner was served. They moved to the dining room where a long table was set with gleaming silver and fine china. Lord Reginald Ashford, a gaunt man with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes, awaited them at the head of the table. His presence was commanding, though his hands trembled slightly as he greeted his guests. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," Lord Ashford said, his voice gravelly but authoritative. "I'm delighted you could join us. I've heard much of your exploits." Poirot bowed again. "The pleasure is mine, Lord Ashford. Your home is a marvel of elegance." Dinner proceeded with a parade of courses: consommé, roasted pheasant, and a decadent chocolate soufflé. The conversation was lively, though Hastings noticed undercurrents of tension. Victor Crane boasted about his latest business ventures, while Clara regaled the table with tales of her stage triumphs. Dr. Grayson spoke little, his attention often drifting to Lady Eleanor, who deflected questions about her husband's health with practiced ease. Emily remained silent, her eyes darting nervously toward her uncle. As the meal drew to a close, Lord Ashford tapped his glass, silencing the room. "My friends," he began, his tone grave, "I have an announcement. Tomorrow, I intend to revise my will. Circumstances have changed and certain adjustments are necessary. I trust you'll understand." A hush fell over the table. Victor's smile faltered, Clara's eyes narrowed, and Emily's hands tightened in her lap. Lady Eleanor's expression was unreadable, though her fingers toyed with the stem of her wineglass. Dr. Grayson cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "A prudent decision, Reginald. One must always plan for the future." Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose face was a mask of polite interest, though his eyes gleamed with that familiar spark of suspicion. The air felt heavier now, as if Lord Ashford's words had cast a shadow over the gathering. After dinner, the guests retired to the drawing room for coffee and brandy. Hastings, feeling the effects of the wine, excused himself to step outside for some air. The night was crisp, the stars brilliant against a velvet sky. He wandered toward the garden, where roses and topiaries were silhouetted against the manor's glowing windows. As he lit a cigarette, he heard a soft rustling nearby. Turning, he saw Emily hurrying along a path, clutching a shawl around her shoulders. "Miss Ashford?" he called gently, not wanting to startle her. She froze, then turned, her face pale in the moonlight. "Oh, Captain Hastings, I just needed some air." "Bit chilly for a stroll," he said, offering a friendly smile. "Everything all right?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I suppose, it's just Uncle Reginald's announcement. It stirred things up." Hastings frowned. "Stirred things up how?" Emily bit her lip, then shook her head. "It's nothing. I shouldn't have said anything. Good night." "Captain." She hurried back toward the manor, leaving Hastings puzzled. Returning to the drawing room, he found Poirot deep in conversation with Lady Eleanor. The detective's questions were innocuous, about the manor's history, its gardens, but Hastings knew better. Poirot was probing, testing the waters. When they finally retired to their rooms, Hastings recounted his encounter with Emily. "Interesting, mon ami," Poirot said, polishing his spectacles. "The young Mademoiselle Emily is nervous, non? And Lord Ashford's announcement, it has set the wheels in motion. We must watch closely." "Watch for what?" Hastings asked, exasperated. "It's just a family squabble over money, isn't it?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, but Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences. Sleep well, Hastings. Tomorrow, I suspect, will be most illuminating." Hastings settled into his room, a cozy chamber with a four-poster bed and heavy drapes. As he drifted over. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Suspicion. The air in Ravenwood Manor seemed to thicken with the weight of Lord Ashford's death, as though the very walls absorbed the shock and whispered it back in the creak of floorboards and the flicker of candlelight. Captain Arthur Hastings stood just outside the study, his heart still racing from the grim discovery of Lord Ashford's body, the silver-handled letter opener glinting cruelly in the lamplight. Hercule Poirot, ever composed, was already at work, his small frame moving with deliberate precision as he examined the room. The other guests hovered in the corridor, their faces a tableau of horror, suspicion, and barely concealed unease. Inspector Japp, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, barked orders to a young constable who had arrived with him from the nearby village. "Secure the perimeter, lad, and don't let anyone wander off. We've got a murder on our hands, and I'll not have evidence trampled." His eyes flicked to Poirot, who was kneeling beside the desk, inspecting the spilled ink bottle with a magnifying glass. "Well, Poirot, you've landed in it this time. Care to share what those little gray cells of yours are cooking up?" Poirot rose, brushing a speck of dust from his immaculate suit. "Patience, mon cher Japp. The scene it speaks, but one must listen carefully. The locked door, the torn paper, the ink, these are not accidents. They are the threads of a tapestry, and Hercule Poirot shall weave them together." Hastings, standing near the doorway, felt a familiar mix of admiration and exasperation. Poirot's cryptic pronouncements were all well and good, but the scene before them seemed straightforward enough. Lord Ashford had been stabbed, the room locked, and the murderer had clearly fled, perhaps through the window, leaving chaos in their wake. "I say, Poirot," he ventured, "it looks like a robbery gone wrong. Some outsider got wind of Ashford's wealth, broke in, and things got out of hand. That torn paper with trust, probably just a note he was writing when he was attacked." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sure sign he was amused. "Mon ami, your imagination, it is vivid, but it lacks precision. A robbery? Non, non. The valuables in this room, the gold cigarette case, the diamond cufflinks, they remain untouched. And the word trust, it is too convenient, too deliberate. No, this is a crime of intention, not impulse." Hastings frowned, unconvinced but unwilling to argue just yet. He glanced at the guests, who had been ushered into the drawing room, across the hall by Lady Eleanor. Her composure was remarkable, though her hands trembled slightly as she poured tea for the group, as if clinging to routine could ward off the horror. Victor Crane paced by the fireplace, his face flushed, muttering about the damned inconvenience of it all. Clara Beaumont sat poised on a chaise longue, her crimson gown a stark contrast to her pale face, though her eyes darted about, taking in every detail. Dr. Grayson stood by a window, his spectacles reflecting the firelight, his expression unreadable. Emily Ashford, curled in an armchair, looked as though she might dissolve into tears at any moment. Japp joined Poirot in the study, leaving Hastings to keep an eye on the guests. "Best not let them out of sight," Japp muttered. "One of this lot might be our killer." Hastings nodded, though he felt a pang of discomfort at the thought. These were refined people, not common criminals. Surely the murderer was an outsider, some vagrant or disgruntled servant. He approached Emily, hoping to offer some comfort. "Miss Ashford, are you all right? This must be a terrible shock." Emily's eyes, wide and glassy, met his. I can't believe it. Uncle Reginald he was so strong, so sure of himself. Who would do this?" Her voice broke and she clutched her shawl tighter. Hastings patted her hand awkwardly. "We'll find out, don't you worry. Poirot's the best there is. He'll get to the bottom of it." Emily nodded, but her gaze drifted to the study door, where Poirot's silhouette was visible through the crack. "I heard footsteps," she whispered suddenly, so softly Hastings had to lean closer. "Last night, before the scream, outside my room, I thought it was just a servant, but now—" Hastings' pulse quickened. "Footsteps? Did you see anyone?" She shook her head. "No, it was too dark. But they were quick, like someone didn't want to be heard." Before Hastings could press further, Lady Eleanor approached, her smile strained. "Captain Hastings, perhaps you'd care for some tea? We must keep our strength up in such trying times." Her politeness felt forced, and Hastings noticed her glance toward Emily, a flicker of something, warning, concern, in her eyes. "Thank you, Lady Ashford," he said, accepting a cup he had no intention of drinking. "You're holding up remarkably well, if I may say." Lady Eleanor's smile tightened. "One must, Captain. Reginald would expect nothing less." As she moved away, Hastings made a mental note of Emily's comment about the footsteps. It was a clue, surely, and one he intended to share with Poirot. He felt a spark of determination. Poirot might have his little gray cells, but Hastings had his instincts, and they were telling him to dig deeper. In the study, Poirot was now examining the torn scrap of paper with the word "trust." He held it to the light, his brow furrowed. "Curious, n'est-ce pas? The tear is uneven, as if done in haste, yet the word is written with care. Why leave such a clue? To point us toward the truth? Or away from it?" Japp snorted. "Sounds like you're reading too much into a bit of scribble, Poirot." "Probably just Ashford jotting down a reminder." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No, Inspector. Hercule Poirot does not believe in meaningless scribbles. This word, it is a message. But to whom? And from whom?" Hastings, hovering at the door, couldn't resist chiming in. Emily mentioned hearing footsteps outside her room before the scream. Could be our man sneaking about. Poirot turned, his expression one of mild surprise. "Footsteps, you say? Très intéressant. And what time was this, mon ami?" Hastings hesitated, realizing he hadn't asked. She didn't say exactly, but it was before the scream, so maybe 11:30? Poirot nodded, though his eye suggested he was already 3 steps ahead. "We shall speak with Mademoiselle Emily. But first, the room. The window, it is closed but not locked. The key to the door, it is missing. And the ink, why spill it? To cover something, perhaps? Or to create a distraction?" Japp scratched his head. "You're making my brain ache, Poirot. I say we start. With the obvious, question the lot of them. Someone's bound to crack." "Question, yes," Poirot agreed, "but with care. The guilty, they will not crack so easily. They will lie, they will deflect. We must observe, listen, and let the truth reveal itself." As Japp began organizing the constable to take statements, Hastings slipped back to the drawing room. Victor, Crane was now arguing with Clara, their voices low but heated. "You knew he was changing the will," Victor hissed. "Don't play innocent with me." Clara's laugh was sharp, like glass breaking. "Oh, Victor, don't be tiresome. You're not the only one who stood to lose something." Hastings edged closer, pretending to admire a painting on the wall. Their words suggested motives: money, betrayal, secrets. He made a mental note to tell Poirot about this exchange. Victor, with his brash demeanor and financial troubles, Hastings had overheard a servant mention Victor's debts, seemed a likely suspect. A man desperate for money might do anything, even murder. Dr. Grayson, meanwhile, had moved to Lady Eleanor's side, speaking in hushed tones. Hastings caught only fragments, must stay calm, and no one must know. Before they noticed, Hymen fell silent. His suspicions deepened. What were they hiding? And why was Emily so nervous, as if she expected the murderer to strike again? Poirot emerged from the study, his face serene but his eyes alight with purpose. Hastings, come. We shall begin with the alibis. Monsieur Crane, if you please. Victor, still red-faced from his argument with Clara, strode over. What's this about? I was playing cards with Clara and the butler until well past midnight, ask anyone. Clara nodded, her smile cool. It's true, Monsieur Poirot. We were in the billiard room having a grand time. Poor Reginald was alive and well when we last saw him. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, as if weighing every word. And you, Mademoiselle Beaumont, you saw nothing unusual? No one leaving? The billiard room? Clara's eyes flickered, but her voice was steady. Nothing at all, just cards and laughter. Hastings, watching closely, noticed her fingers tighten around her fan. She was nervous, he was sure of it. He leaned toward Poirot and whispered, She's hiding something, did you see her hands? Poirot's nod was almost imperceptible. By an observé, Hastings, but we must not rush. The truth, it is like a fine wine, it requires time to breathe. The questioning continued, with each guest offering their version of events. Lady Eleanor claimed she was in her room, reading, and heard nothing until the scream. Dr. Grayson said he was in the library, reviewing medical journals, though he admitted to stepping out briefly to check on Lord Ashford's medication. Emily, trembling, repeated her story about the footsteps but could offer no further details. The butler and maids confirmed the card game in the billiard room, though one maid hesitated when asked if anyone left briefly. As the night wore on, the manor grew colder, the fire in the drawing room dwindling to embers. Hastings felt the weight of suspicion settle over the group like a fog. Every glance, every word, seemed laden with meaning. He couldn't shake the image of Lord Ashford's body, the word trust scrawled on that torn paper. Was it a dying message or a clever ruse by the killer? See, the first light of dawn crept through the heavy drapes of Ravenwood Manor, casting a pallid glow over the grim tableau in Lord Reginald Ashford's study. The room, once a bastion of scholarly order, now bore the chaotic imprint of violence. The spilled ink pooling like black blood on the mahogany desk, the torn scrap of paper with its cryptic trust, and the lifeless form of Lord Ashford, still slumped forward, the silver letter opener protruding from his chest. Captain Arthur Hastings stood at the threshold, his breath catching as he took in the scene anew. The horror of the previous night had not diminished. If anything, the cold light of morning made it more stark, more real. Hercule Poirot, immaculate, despite the sleepless hours, moved with the precision of a surgeon, his eyes darting from the desk to the window, from the carpet to the walls. Inspector Japp, his face etched with fatigue, stood nearby, scribbling notes in a small black book. A young constable, barely out of his teens, guarded the door, his expression a mix of awe and nervousness as he watched the famous detective at work. Poirot, Japp said, his voice gruff. You've been poking about for hours. Found anything worth sharing, or are you just admiring the furniture? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Mon cher Japp, the furniture, it speaks, if one knows how to listen. Observe, the desk. It is not merely a desk. It is a stage, and the props upon it tell a story. Hastings, hovering near the door, felt a familiar surge of impatience. Poirot's penchant for theatrics was all well and good, but surely the answer lay in the obvious. A murderer had entered, stabbed Lord Ashford, and fled, locking the door behind them. I say, Poirot, he interjected, it's clear enough. Isn't it? Someone got in through the window, did the deed, and slipped out the same way. The lock's a red herring. Probably just stuck or tampered with. Poirot turned, his green eyes glinting with amusement. Mon ami, your enthusiasm? It is admirable, but your conclusion, it is premature. The window, it is closed, yes, but not locked. And yet there is no sign of disturbance outside. No footprints in the dew, no broken branches in the shrubbery. None. The solution is not so simple. Jap snorted, scratching his chin. Simple or not, we've got a body and a locked room. I'm leaning toward an outsider, a thief maybe who knew Ashford kept valuables here. That letter opener's worth a pretty penny. Poirot shook his head, his expression one of patient correction. No, Inspector. The letter opener, it is not the weapon of a thief. It is personal, intimate. A thief takes, he does not stab. And the valuables, the gold cigarette case, the watch, they remain. This is a crime of passion, of purpose. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. Poirot's words made sense, but they only deepened the mystery. If not a thief, then who? He glanced at the guests, who had been confined to the drawing room under the watchful eye of another constable. Lady Eleanor's calm demeanor, Victor Crane's bluster, Clara Beaumont's theatrical poise, Dr. Grayson's reticence, Emily Ashford's nervous glances, each seemed to carry a secret, a motive waiting to be uncovered. Poirot knelt beside the desk, his magnifying glass hovering over the spilled ink. Regardez, Hastings, the ink, it is not merely spilled. It has spread in a pattern, as if the bottle was knocked over in a struggle, or perhaps deliberately to obscure something, and the paper torn so precisely, with only the word trust visible. Why this word? Why leave it for us to find? Hastings peered over Poirot's shoulder, trying to see what the detective saw. The ink had formed a jagged pool, seeping into the grain of the wood. The torn paper lay nearby, its edges ragged but deliberate, as if someone had ripped it in haste. Maybe Ashford was writing a note when he was attacked, Hastings suggested. He could have been trying to name his killer. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Possible, mon ami, but unlikely. A man stabbed in the heart does not pause to write a single word. No, this is a clue placed for us, a breadcrumb to lead us astray. Or, perhaps to the truth. Jap, growing restless, gestured toward the door. Enough with the breadcrumbs, Poirot. I'm going to check the grounds myself. If there's a way in or out, I'll find it. You keep poking at your clues. He strode out, leaving the constable to maintain the cordon. Hastings seized the moment to share his earlier observation. Poirot, about those footsteps Emily mentioned. She said they were quick, furtive, like someone trying not to be heard. Could it be our murderer, sneaking to the study? Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. Bien, Hastings. The footsteps, they are significant. We must ascertain the exact time and place. Mademoiselle Emily, she is nervous, yes? Perhaps she knows more than she says. Hastings felt a spark of pride. His observation had caught Poirot's attention, and he was determined to follow it through. I'll talk to her again, get more details. And I overheard Victor arguing with Clara last night. Something about the will. He sounded desperate. Poirot's smile was encouraging. You are observant, mon ami. Keep listening, keep watching. The smallest detail, it may be the key to the puzzle. With Jap gone, Poirot continued his examination, moving to the window. It was a large sash window, its frame slightly warped with age, the latch undone but the glass intact. He opened it, leaning out to inspect the sill and the ground below. Hastings joined him, noting the pristine lawn, undisturbed by footprints or trampled grass. See, Poirot? No one came this way. Maybe they climbed the ivy. There's plenty of it on the wall. Poirot shook his head. The ivy, it is too fragile to support a man's weight. And the sill, it is clean. No smudges, no scratches. If someone entered here, they were a ghost. Non, the answer lies within the room, within the manor. Hastings' mind churned. If the window was a dead end, then the locked door was the key. But how had the murderer entered and escaped? He recalled the butler's mention of a master key, used by the staff to access all rooms. Could someone have taken it? He made a mental note to ask the butler later. Poirot moved to the bookshelves, running his fingers along the spines. Lord Ashford, he was a man of secrets, n'est-ce pas? A man who locks his study, who plans to change his will. What was he hiding, I wonder? Hastings, eager to contribute, pointed to a small portrait above the desk. A stern-faced woman, with Lord Ashford's piercing blue eyes. Maybe it's family trouble. Emily said something about the will stirring things up. Could be an old grudge. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Family? Yes, the heart of many a crime. We shall speak with the guests. But first, the room must reveal its secrets. As Poirot continued his meticulous inspection, Hastings slipped out to the drawing room where the guests were growing restless. Lady Eleanor stood by the fireplace, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on the flames. Victor was pacing again, his cigar smoke curling toward the ceiling. Clara, reclining on a sofa, fanned herself languidly, though her gaze was sharp, assessing. Dr. Grayson sat apart, his hands clasped tightly, while Emily fidgeted with a handkerchief, her face pale. Hastings approached Emily, keeping his tone gentle. Miss Ashford, about those footsteps, can you tell me more? What time was it exactly? Emily's eyes darted to Lady Eleanor, then back to Hastings. I'm not sure. Maybe 11:30? I was reading in bed and I heard them outside my door. Quick steps like someone in a hurry. I thought it was a servant, but now... Did you hear anything else? A voice, perhaps, or a door opening? She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. No, just the footsteps. I was too scared to look. Hastings nodded, offering a reassuring smile. You've done well to tell me. We'll sort this out, I promise. As he turned away, he caught Clara watching him, her lips curved in a faint, mocking smile. Captain Hastings, playing detective? How charming. Be careful. You might stumble on something. You don't want to find. Her tone was teasing, but there was an edge to it that set Hastings' nerves on edge. He forced a smile. Just trying to help, Miss Beaumont. Someone's got to get to the bottom of this. Clara's laugh was light, but her eyes were cold. Oh, I'm sure Monsieur Poirot will manage. He's the genius, after all. Hastings bristled but held his tongue. Clara's words stung, but they only fueled his resolve. He would prove he was more than Poirot's shadow, more than a bumbling sidekick. He returned to the study where Poirot was now examining the letter opener, its blade still embedded in Lord Ashford's chest. Careful, Poirot, Hastings said, wincing. That's a grim sight. Poirot's expression was unperturbed. Death, it is never pleasant, mon ami, but it is honest. The body, it tells no lies. See here, the angle of the blade. It suggests the killer was close, perhaps standing over the desk. A moment of trust, betrayed. Hastings swallowed, his mind flashing to the word trust on the torn paper. You think Ashford knew his killer? Poirot nodded. Almost certainly. This was no stranger's work. The letter opener, it is from this very desk. The killer chose it deliberately, a weapon of opportunity, but also of meaning. Japp returned, his face flushed from the morning chill. Nothing outside, Poirot. The grounds are clean as a whistle. If your killer didn't use the window, they were already inside. Précisément, Poirot said, his voice low. The murderer is one of us here in this house, and they are clever, very clever, but Hercule Poirot is cleverer still. The rest of the morning was a blur of activity. The constable took photographs of the scene, while Japp interviewed the staff, who confirmed that no strangers had been seen. The morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy clouds that hung over Ravenwood Manor, casting a muted gray light across the estate. Inside, the air was thick with unease, as though the very walls of the grand house were holding their breath, waiting for the next revelation. Captain Arthur Hastings stood in the drawing room, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind a whirl of fragmented clues and nagging suspicions. The murder of Lord Reginald Ashford had transformed the opulent manor into a stage for suspicion, and Hastings was determined to play a leading role in unraveling the mystery. Hercule Poirot, as ever, was the picture of composure, seated in a high-backed chair near the fireplace, his small hands folded neatly over his waistcoat. His green eyes, sharp as a hawk's, darted between the guests who were scattered about the room like actors in a tense drama. Inspector Japp had retreated to the study to oversee the removal of Lord Ashford's body, leaving Poirot and Hastings to begin their interrogations. The constable at the door stood rigid, his youthful face betraying a mix of awe and anxiety, as he watched the famous detective at work. Hastings, however, was not content to merely observe. The events of the previous night, the locked study, the torn paper with its cryptic trust, Emily's whispered confession about the footsteps, had ignited a spark of determination in him. Poirot might have his little gray cells, but Hastings had his instincts, and they were telling him that the key to the case lay with the guests, their motives and their secrets. He had a theory, one he was eager to test, and he wasn't about to let Poirot's cryptic pronouncements overshadow his contribution. "Poirot," Hastings said, keeping his voice low as he approached the detective. "I've been thinking, Victor Crane. He's got motive written all over him. I overheard the butler mention he's in financial trouble, and last night he was arguing with Clara about the will. If Ashford was cutting him out, that's reason enough to, well, you know." Poirot's mustache quivered, a sure sign of amusement. "Mon ami, your enthusiasm, it is commendable. Monsieur Crane, he is indeed a man of, how do you say, ambition. But motive alone does not make a murderer. Tell me, what of his alibi?" Hastings frowned, recalling Victor's claim. "He said he was playing cards with Clara and the butler until after midnight. The others confirmed it." "Précisément," Poirot said, his tone measured.
"An alibi supported by multiple witnesses. Convenient, no? But we shall test it. Come, let us speak with Mademoiselle Emily first. Her footsteps, they intrigue me." Hastings nodded, though his mind was still on Victor. The man's brash demeanor,
his flushed face during the argument with Clara, it all pointed to a man under pressure, a man capable of desperate acts. But Poirot was right. They needed more than suspicion. Hastings straightened his tie, resolved to pursue his theory while keeping an open mind. They found Emily Ashford in a quiet corner of the drawing room, her small frame hunched over a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Her mousy brown hair was slightly disheveled, and her eyes, wide and anxious, darted toward the study door, as if expecting Lord Ashford's ghost to emerge. Lady Eleanor was nearby, speaking in low tones to Dr. Grayson, while Victor paced by, the window muttering to himself. Clara Beaumont, ever the actress, lounged on a chaise longue, her crimson gown a vivid splash against the room's muted tones, her fan moving lazily in her hand. "Mademoiselle Emily," Poirot began, his voice gentle but firm, "you spoke to my friend Captain Hastings of footsteps last night. Can you tell us more? The time, the direction, perhaps a sound that accompanied them?" Emily's hands tightened around her cup, the porcelain clinking faintly. I'm not sure exactly. It was after 11, maybe half past. I was in my room reading. The footsteps were quick, like someone trying not to be noticed. They came from the direction of the West Wing, near Uncle Reginald's study. Hastings leaned forward, his notepad at the ready. "Did you hear anything else, a door perhaps, or a voice?" Emily shook her head, her voice barely audible. "No, just the footsteps. I thought it was a servant at first, but after what happened, I'm not so sure." Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his smile remained kind. "And your room, it is where in relation to the study?" "2 doors down," Emily said, pointing toward the corridor. "The study's at the end of the hall. My room's on the same side." "Très intéressant," Poirot murmured. "And you did not look out to see who it was?" Emily's cheeks flushed. I was too frightened. I locked my door and stayed in bed." Hastings jotted down her words, his mind racing. Footsteps near the study, just before the murder. It was a solid lead, one that could point to the killer's movements. He glanced at Poirot, expecting praise, but the detective's attention was elsewhere, his gaze fixed on Lady Eleanor, who had paused her conversation with Dr. Grayson to watch them. "Thank you, mademoiselle," Poirot said, rising. "You have been most helpful. We shall speak again." As they moved away, Hastings whispered, "That's something, isn't it?" Footsteps near the study, right around the time of the murder. If we can match them to someone's shoes or... Poirot raised, a hand silencing him. "Patience, Hastings, the footsteps, they are a piece of the puzzle, but we must not force them to fit. Let us now speak with Monsieur Crane." Victor Crane was summoned, his heavy footsteps echoing as he crossed the room. His suit, though expensive, was slightly rumpled, and his eyes were bloodshot, as if he hadn't slept. "What's this about, Poirot?" he demanded, his voice gruff. "I've already told Jap I was playing cards all night." Poirot's smile was disarming. "Indeed, monsieur, but Hercule Poirot, he likes to hear things for himself. Tell me, what was the nature of your card game? And who was present?" Victor shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "It was bridge. Me, Clara, the butler, and one of them, aides. We played in the billiard room from about 10 until well past midnight. Ask any of them." "And you did not leave the room at any point?" Poirot pressed, his tone mild but probing. "Not for a second," Victor said, his jaw tightening. "Look, I know what you're thinking. Ashford was about to change his will, and I'm no saint, but I didn't kill him. I was counting on him for a deal, not a knife in the back." Hastings, unable to resist, jumped in. "I overheard you arguing with Miss Beaumont last night about the will. Sounded like you were worried about losing something." Victor's face reddened and he shot Hastings a glare. "Eavesdropping, were you? That was private business. Clara and I had a disagreement, that's all. Nothing to do with murder." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, monsieur, the will, it is at the heart of this affair, no? What was it you stood to lose?" Victor hesitated, then shrugged. "Ashford was backing a venture of mine, a shipping deal. He was having second thoughts. Said he wanted to redirect his funds. I was trying to change his mind, that's all." Hastings made a mental note. Victor's financial troubles were tied to Lord Ashford's money. If the will change threatened that, it was a motive as clear as day. He glanced at Poirot, expecting him to pounce, but the detective merely nodded. "Thank you, Monsieur Crane. We shall speak again." As Victor stalked off, Hastings whispered, "He's hiding something, Poirot. That argument with Clara, it wasn't just about business. I'd bet my hat he's our man." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Your hat, mon ami, is safe for now. Monsieur Crane, he is a man of secrets, but so are they all. We must look deeper." They moved on to Clara, Beaumont, who rose from her chaise with the grace of a stage star, her fan fluttering like a prop in a play. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice a melodic purr. "How thrilling to be questioned by such distinguished gentlemen, though I assure you I am quite innocent." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle, your charm, it is formidable. But tell me, your card game with Monsieur Crane, did anyone leave the billiard room even briefly?" Clara's eyes flickered, but her smile held. "Not that I recall. We were all quite engrossed. Bridge is such a demanding game, don't you think?" Hastings, watching her closely, noticed the slight tightening of her grip on the fan. "Miss Beaumont," he said, "I heard you and Victor arguing last night. Something about a deal gone wrong. Care to explain?" Clara's laugh was light, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Captain, you do have sharp ears. Victor was being his usual tiresome self, fretting over business matters. Nothing more." Poirot tilted his head. "And, yet, mademoiselle, you were close to Lord Ashford, no? Perhaps you knew of his plans for the will?" Clara's fan paused mid-flutter. "I knew he was planning changes, yes. He mentioned it at dinner, didn't he? But I'm an actress, not an heiress. His will was no concern of mine." Hastings wasn't convinced. Clara's poise was too perfect, her answers too rehearsed. He made another note. Clara and Victor, both tied to the will, both evasive. He was beginning to see a pattern, and he was determined to follow it. The interrogations continued, with Lady Eleanor and Dr. Grayson offering their alibis. Lady Eleanor claimed she was in her room, reading, and heard nothing until the scream. Her voice was steady, but Hastings noticed her fingers toy with a pearl necklace, a nervous tic she couldn't quite hide. Dr. Grayson said he was in the library, reviewing medical journals, though he admitted to stepping out to check on Lord Ashford's medication around 11. A routine check, he said, his tone clipped. Reginald had a heart condition. Hastings seized on this. So you were near the study around the time. Chapter 5. Poirot's little gray cells, the late morning light filtered through the tall windows of Ravenwood Manor, casting long shadows across the polished oak floors of the drawing room. The grandeur of the estate, with its gilded mirrors and velvet drapes, seemed diminished by the pall of suspicion that hung over its occupants. The murder of Lord Reginald Ashford had transformed the house into a labyrinth of secrets, and Captain Arthur Hastings felt the weight of it pressing on his shoulders. He stood by a window, his notepad clutched tightly, his mind racing with the clues he'd gathered: Emily's footsteps, Victor's argument with Clara, the missing key, and that enigmatic word trust scrawled on the torn paper. He was determined to piece them together, to prove to Poirot and to himself that he could be more than a mere observer in this investigation. Hercule Poirot, seated in a high-backed armchair near the fireplace, was the picture of calm precision. His small hands were folded neatly over his waistcoat, his waxed mustache gleaming in the soft light, and his green eyes scanned the room with an intensity that belied his serene demeanor. The guests, confined to the drawing room under Inspector Japp's orders, were a study in contrasts. Lady Eleanor, poised but pale, poured tea with a steady hand. Victor Crane paced restlessly, his cigar smoke curling toward the ceiling. Clara Beaumont lounged on a chaise longue, her crimson gown a vivid splash against the muted tones of the room. Dr. Harold Grayson stood by a bookcase, his spectacles glinting as he pretended to read. And Emily Ashford, curled in a corner, clutched a handkerchief as if it were a lifeline. Inspector Japp, his face etched with the strain of a sleepless night, strode into the room, his notebook bristling with scribbled observations. "Right, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff but tinged with respect. "The coroners confirmed Ashford died between 11 and midnight, single stab wound to the heart. No defensive wounds, which suggests he didn't see it coming. And that blasted key's still missing. Any bright ideas?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon cher Japp, the ideas, they are always bright when they come from Hercule Poirot. But we must proceed with method. The key, it is not merely missing, it is a deliberate absence, meant to confuse. And the word trust, it is a message, but to whom? And why?" Hastings, eager to contribute, stepped forward. "I've been thinking about that, Poirot." Emily's footsteps, they were near the study around 11:30. "And Victor's got motive, what with his financial troubles and that row with Clara. I'd wager he slipped away from the card game, used the master key, and—" He caught, himself aware of the guest's eyes on him, and lowered his voice. "Well, you know." Poirot's smile widened, though his eyes held a glint of caution. "Mon ami, your zeal, it is admirable. But we must not leap to conclusions. Monsieur, Crane's alibi, it is supported by Mademoiselle Beaumont and the butler, no? We must test it, yes, but we must also consider the others. The footsteps, the ink, the paper, they are threads in a tapestry, and we must weave them carefully." Japp snorted, scratching his chin. "Tapestry, eh? Sounds like a lot of fancy talk. I'm going to question the staff again. Someone's bound to have seen something. You two keep an eye on this lot." He gestured toward the guests, then strode out, leaving a young constable to guard the door. Hastings felt a pang of frustration. Poirot's cryptic remarks were all well and good, but his own theory about Victor seemed solid, grounded in evidence. He wasn't about to let it go. Turning to Poirot, he said, "I'm going to talk to Emily again. She might remember something, more about those footsteps, and I'll check with the butler about that card game, see if Victor really stayed put." Poirot nodded, his expression one of quiet approval. "Bien, Hastings. Follow your instincts, but do not let them blind you. The truth, it is often in the details we overlook." Hastings made his way to Emily, who was still huddled in her corner, her eyes red-rimmed but alert. "Miss Ashford," he said gently, "I know this is difficult, but can you think of anything else about those footsteps? Did they stop, or did you hear a door open or close?" Emily's hands twisted the handkerchief, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, it was so quick. They came from the west wing, toward the study, I think. But I didn't hear a door. Just the scream later. I was so frightened I locked my door and stayed in bed. Hastings jotted down her words, his mind racing. The west wing led to the study, and if the footsteps were at 11:30, they aligned with the coroner's timeline. You're doing splendidly, Miss Ashford. Anything else you remember, even the smallest thing, could be vital. Emily nodded, her gaze darting to Lady Eleanor, who was now speaking with Clara in low tones. Hastings followed her glance, noting the subtle tension in Lady Eleanor's posture, the way her fingers toyed with her pearl necklace. Was it nerves, or something more? He made a mental note to watch her closely. Next, he approached the butler, Jenkins, a tall, stoic man with a face like polished granite. Jenkins was arranging a tray of sandwiches, his movements precise despite the chaos of the morning. "Jenkins," Hastings said, keeping his tone casual. "About that card game last night, can you confirm who was there and when?" Jenkins' eyes flicked up, his expression neutral. "Certainly, sir. It was Mr. Crane, Miss Beaumont, myself, and Mary, one of the maids. We played bridge in the billiard room from about 10 o'clock until past midnight. No one left as far as I recall." Hastings pressed further. "As far as you recall? No one stepped out even for a moment? To fetch a drink, perhaps, or use the telephone?" Jenkins hesitated, his brow furrowing slightly. "Well, sir, I suppose Mr. Crane did. Step out briefly around 11, maybe? He said he needed some air. He was back in 10 minutes, no more." Hastings' heart leapt. 10 minutes was enough time to slip to the study, especially if Victor had the master key. "Thank you, Jenkins. That's very helpful." He turned, away, his mind buzzing. Victor's alibi wasn't as ironclad as he'd claimed. This was the break he needed. He hurried back to Poirot, who was now questioning Clara Beaumont. The actress was in full performance, her fan fluttering as she recounted her evening. "Really, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice dripping with charm. "It was just a harmless game of bridge. Victor was his usual boorish self, but we were all together. Such a dreadful thing to happen, poor Reginald." Poirot's eyes were fixed on her as if peering through her carefully constructed facade. "And you, mademoiselle, you saw nothing unusual? No one leaving the billiard room?" Clara's smile didn't waver, but her fan moved faster. "Not a thing. We were all quite absorbed in the game." Hastings couldn't resist. "Actually, Miss Beaumont, Jenkins just told me Victor stepped out for 10 minutes around 11. Care to explain that?" Clara's eyes widened briefly, but she recovered quickly, her laugh light and dismissive. "Oh, that? Victor's always pacing about, muttering about his deals. He was only gone a moment. Hardly enough time for, well, you know." Poirot's gaze shifted to Hastings, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Well done, mon ami. A discrepancy, however small, is a crack in the alibi. We shall pursue it." Hastings felt a surge of pride. He'd caught something Poirot hadn't, at least not yet. He pressed on, addressing Clara. "And that argument I overheard between you and Victor about the will. It sounded heated. What was that about?" Clara's fan snapped shut, her expression cooling. "Captain Hastings, you do have a knack for eavesdropping. It was nothing, a silly disagreement about business. Victor's always fretting about money." Poirot tilted his head, his voice soft but probing. "And yet, mademoiselle, the will, it is central to this affair, no? Lord Ashford's decision to change it, it affected many. Perhaps you too?" Clara's laugh was sharp, like glass breaking. "Me? I'm an actress, Monsieur Poirot, not a gold digger. Reginald was a friend, nothing more. His will was his business." Hastings wasn't convinced. Clara's poise was too perfect, her answers too polished. He made a note. Clara and Victor, both tied to the will, both covering something. He was building his case, and it felt solid. Poirot moved on to Lady Eleanor, who stood by the fireplace, her composure as impeccable as ever. "Madame," he said, bowing slightly, "you were in your room last night, reading, you say. Did you hear anything? The scream, perhaps, or footsteps like Mademoiselle Emily?" Lady Eleanor's fingers paused on her necklace, her smile serene but strained. I heard the scream, of course. It woke the whole house. But footsteps? No, I'm afraid not. My room is in the east wing, quite far from the study. Hastings noted the distance. If Emily's room was near the study and Lady Eleanor's was not, it made sense she heard nothing. But her calm was unnerving, almost unnatural. He leaned toward Poirot and whispered, "She's too composed, don't you think? Most people would be a wreck after their husband's murder." Poirot's nod was barely perceptible. "Indeed, mon ami. The calm? It is sometimes a mask. We shall see what lies beneath." Dr. Grayson was next, his reserved demeanor a stark contrast to Clara's theatrics. He adjusted his spectacles, his voice clipped. "I was in the library until about 11 reviewing journals. I stepped out to check Lord Ashford's medication in his room, then returned. I heard nothing until the scream." Hastings seized on this. "You were near the study around 11 then?" "That's when Emily heard footsteps. Did you see anyone in the corridor?" Grayson's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, Captain. The corridor was empty." Chapter 6. The Missing Key. The afternoon light waned over Ravenwood Manor, casting long, wavering shadows across the manicured lawns and into the grand halls where the air seemed to hum with unspoken secrets. The murder of Lord Reginald Ashford had turned the estate into a crucible of suspicion, and Captain Arthur Hastings felt its heat keenly. He stood in the west wing corridor, just outside the sealed study door, his notepad clutched tightly, his mind a whirl of clues and theories. The footsteps Emily had heard, Victor Crane's shaky alibi, the torn paper with its cryptic trust, all pointed to a puzzle that was tantalizingly close to resolution. Hastings was determined to prove his worth, to show Hercule Poirot that he could do more than follow in the great detective's shadow. Poirot himself was in the drawing room, his small frame perched on a velvet-upholstered chair, his green eyes scanning the guests with the precision of a watchmaker. Inspector Japp, his face lined with the strain of a fruitless search for the missing master key, was barking orders to a pair of constables tasked with combing the manor's grounds. The guests, Lady Eleanor Ashford, Victor Crane, Clara Beaumont, Dr. Harold Grayson, and Emily Ashford, remained confined to the drawing room, their every glance and gesture laden with tension. The atmosphere was oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in, urging someone to break the silence with a confession. Hastings, however, was not content to wait. His theory about Victor Crane was solidifying with every new piece of evidence. The man's financial troubles, his argument with Clara, his brief absence from the card game, and now the missing key, which Jenkins the butler had confirmed was gone from the housekeeper's office. Hastings was certain Victor had taken it, slipped into the study and stabbed Lord Ashford in a desperate bid to secure his financial future. He just needed proof, something concrete to present to Poirot and Japp. "Poirot," Hastings said, striding into the drawing room, his voice low but eager. "I've been thinking about that key. Jenkins said it's missing and Mary saw a shadow in the corridor around 11:30. It's got to be Victor. He left the card game around then. He could have grabbed the key, gone to the study, and—" Poirot raised a hand, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "Mon ami, your enthusiasm, it is like a fine horse, full of spirit but in need of reins. The key, yes, it is significant. But we must not assume it was Monsieur Crane without evidence. The shadow, the footsteps, they are threads, but the tapestry, it is not yet complete." Hastings bristled, though he kept his tone respectful. "But it all fits, Poirot. Victor's got the motive, the opportunity, and he's been dodging questions. I say we press him harder." Poirot's eyes gleamed, a mix of amusement and approval. "Press, yes, but with care. The guilty, they are clever, Hastings. They weave their alibis like a spider its web. We must find the weak strand. Come, let us examine the grounds ourselves. The key, it may yet be found." Hastings nodded, his resolve unshaken. If Poirot wanted to search the grounds, fine, but he was certain the answer lay with Victor. Still, he followed the detective out of the drawing room, past the constable guarding the door, and into the crisp autumn air. The manor's gardens were a labyrinth of neatly trimmed hedges, rose bushes and gravel paths, their beauty marred by the knowledge of the crime committed within the house. The lawn stretched toward a copse of oaks, and beyond that, a small pond glimmered in the fading light. Poirot moved with his usual precision, his polished shoes crunching softly on the gravel as he inspected the area beneath the study window. The sash window, slightly ajar, looked out onto a bed of chrysanthemums, their petals untouched by any sign of disturbance. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to the soil. "No footprints, no crushed flowers. If the killer used this window, they were a phantom." Hastings frowned, peering at the ground. "Maybe they were careful, Poirot, or maybe they threw the key out here to hide it." He dropped to his knees, ignoring the damp earth, and began sifting through the soil, his fingers brushing aside leaves and petals. His heart leapt as he felt something cold and metallic. A small, ornate key, its surface tarnished but unmistakable. "Poirot, look," he exclaimed, holding it up. "The master key. It was here, under the chrysanthemums." Poirot's eyes widened, a rare flash of surprise crossing his face. "Mon ami, you have done well. The key. It is a vital piece. But why here? Why discard it so close to the scene?" Hastings stood, brushing dirt from his trousers, his mind racing. To make it look like an outsider, of course. Victor could have stabbed Ashford, locked the door, tossed the key out the window, and rejoined the card game. It's perfect, except he didn't count on us finding it. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A theory, yes, but we must test it. The key. It unlocks the door. But does it unlock the truth? Come. We shall return to the study and try it." They hurried back to the manor, Hastings clutching the key like a trophy. The constable let them into the sealed study, where the air was heavy with the scent of spilled ink and tragedy. Lord Ashford's body had been removed, but the desk remained as they'd left it. The ink bottle overturned, the torn paper with trust lying beside it, the bloodstain a grim reminder of the crime. Poirot inserted the key into the lock, turning it with a satisfying click. The door opened smoothly, confirming it was indeed the master key. "Voilà," Poirot said, his voice low. "The door, it yields, but the question remains. When was the key taken and by whom?" Hastings, buoyed by his find, pressed his case. "It's got to be Victor. He left the card game, Jenkins said so. 10 minutes is enough to grab the key. From the housekeeper's office, get to the study and do the deed. The shadow Mary saw, the footsteps Emily heard. It all points to him." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Possible, mon ami, but consider. The key, it is found outside, yet the window shows no sign of use. Why throw it out if the killer did not escape that way? And the word, trust, why leave such a clue? To implicate Monsieur Crane, or to divert us from another?" Hastings sighed, his excitement tempered by Poirot's relentless logic. "You're saying I'm jumping the gun again?" Poirot clapped him on the shoulder, a rare gesture of warmth. "Non, Hastings, you are learning. The key, it is your discovery and it is significant, but we must weave it into the whole. Let us speak with the guests again and we shall see what threads unravel." They returned to the drawing room where the guests were growing increasingly restless. Lady Eleanor stood by the fireplace, her composure as flawless as ever, though her fingers toyed with her pearl necklace, a subtle sign of strain. Victor was arguing with Japp, who had returned from questioning the staff, his voice loud and indignant. "I'm telling you, Inspector, I didn't leave that card game for more than a minute. This is harassment." Clara, watching from her chaise, smirked, her fan fluttering. "Oh, Victor, do calm down. You're making yourself look guilty, Dr." Grayson, standing by a window, adjusted his spectacles, his face impassive. Emily, still in her corner, looked up as Poirot and Hastings entered, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. Japp, spotting the key in Poirot's hand, raised an eyebrow. "What's this then? Found something?" Hastings, unable to contain his pride, spoke up. "I found it, Inspector, in the garden under the study window. It's the master key, and it fits the study door." Japp's eyes lit up. "Good work. Hastings, that's a proper clue. So the killer locked the door and tossed the key out to make it look like an outsider. Clever, but not clever enough. Poirot's smile was measured. Perhaps, Inspector, but we must ask, why the garden? Why not hide it elsewhere or keep it? The key. It is a message like the word trust. Victor, overhearing, stormed over. What's this about a key? You trying to pin this on me? I was playing cards, I tell you. Hastings seized the moment. Not the whole time, Mr. Crane. Jenkins said you stepped out for 10 minutes around 11. Plenty of time to grab the key and get to the study. Victor's face reddened, his fists clenching. That's a lie. I went for air, maybe 5 minutes tops. Ask Clara, she'll tell you. Clara's fan paused, her eyes narrowing. Really, Victor, you were gone a bit longer than that. But I'm sure it was innocent, wasn't it? Her tone was teasing, but there was an edge to it that made Hastings' suspicions flare. Poirot's voice cut through the tension, smooth and calm. Monsieur Crane, Mademoiselle Beaumont, let us be clear. The key, it was found outside the study. Window. The door, it was locked. Someone used this key and someone discarded it. Who and why? Victor sputtered, but Clara spoke first, her voice cool. I've no idea, Monsieur Poirot. I was playing cards, as I said. Perhaps one of the servants took it. Hastings, watching her closely, noticed the slight tremor in her hand as she resumed fanning herself. She was nervous, he was sure of it. He made a mental note to press her later, perhaps away from Victor's influence. Poirot turned to Lady Eleanor, who had been listening silently. Madame, the key, it was kept in the housekeeper's office, yes? Who had access? Lady Eleanor's smile was serene, but her eyes were guarded. The housekeeper, Mrs. Baxter, and Jenkins primarily. But the office is not locked during the day. Anyone could have taken it, I suppose. Dr. Grayson, who had been quiet, spoke up. The office is near the library. I passed it last night when I went to check Reginald's medication. The door was ajar, but I didn't see anyone. Hastings' pulse quickened. Grayson, near the housekeeper's office, around. Chapter 7. A clash of methods. The dusk settled over Ravenwood Manor like a heavy velvet curtain, its deepening shadows mirroring the growing unease within the grand estate. The murder of Lord Reginald Ashford had cast a pall over the house, transforming its opulent halls into a maze of suspicion and secrets. Captain Arthur Hastings stood in the West Wing corridor, his notepad now a dog-eared companion, filled with scribbled observations. Emily's footsteps, Victor Crane's shaky alibi, the master key found in the garden, the handkerchief marked with an E, and the cryptic word trust on the torn paper. Each clue fueled his determination to unravel the mystery, to prove to Hercule Poirot that he could be more than a loyal follower, that he could match the great detective's brilliance with his own instincts. Inside the drawing room, Poirot sat, with his usual air of unruffled precision, his small hands folded neatly over his waistcoat, his green eyes scanning the guests with a sharpness that belied his calm demeanor. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering light across the faces of Lady Eleanor Ashford, Victor Crane, Clara Beaumont, Dr. Harold Grayson, and Emily Ashford, each of whom seemed to carry the weight of their own secrets. Inspector Japp, his face etched with frustration after a fruitless search of the pond and grounds, was coordinating with his constables, his voice a low rumble as he issued orders to keep the guests under watch. Hastings, however, was growing restless. His theory about Victor Crane was stronger than ever. The man's financial troubles, his argument with Clara, his absence from the card game, and the master key's discovery in the garden, all pointed to Victor as the prime suspect. Hastings was convinced that Victor had taken the key, slipped into the study, and stabbed Lord Ashford to secure his stake in the soon-to-be-altered will. The handkerchief with the E was a wrinkle, but he suspected it might belong to Emily, perhaps planted to mislead. He was determined to pursue this lead, even if Poirot seemed content to linger over cryptic clues like the spilled ink and the word trust. Poirot, Hastings said, approaching the detective with a determined stride. I'm telling you, it's Victor. The key in the garden clinches it. He left the card game for 10 minutes, long enough to grab the key, get to the study and toss it out the window to make it look like an outsider. We need to press him. Hard. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes twinkling with a mix of amusement and caution. Mon ami, your conviction, it is like a charging bull. Impressive, but it must be guided. Monsieur Crane, he is a suspect. Oui, but the key, the handkerchief, the footsteps, they are pieces of a larger puzzle. We must not force them to fit your theory. Hastings' jaw tightened, his frustration bubbling to the surface. I'm not forcing anything, Poirot. The evidence is there. Victor's motive, his opportunity. You're always going on about your little gray cells, but sometimes the obvious answer is the right one. Poirot's smile was gentle but firm. The obvious, Hastings, it is often a trap. The murderer, they wish us to see the obvious, to follow the path they have laid. Hercule Poirot, he does not follow, he seeks the truth beneath. But your passion, it is valuable. Pursue it, mon ami, but with care. Hastings felt a surge of defiance. Poirot's methods were brilliant, no doubt, but they were slow, meticulous, maddeningly indirect. Hastings wanted action, results. He decided then and there to take matters into his own hands, to follow his instincts and prove his theory, even if it meant clashing with Poirot's measured approach. Fine, he said, his voice clipped. I'll find the proof myself. You'll see I'm right. Poirot's eyes softened, but he said nothing, merely nodding as Hastings turned away. The detective returned to his observation of the guests, his gaze lingering on Lady Eleanor, who was pouring tea with a steadiness that seemed almost unnatural in the wake of her husband's murder. Hastings, meanwhile, made his way to the billiard room where the card game had taken place, determined to find something, anything, that would confirm Victor's guilt. The billiard room was a masculine enclave of dark wood and green baize, its walls lined with hunting trophies and shelves of leather-bound books. The table where Victor, Clara, Jenkins, and the maid Mary had played bridge stood in the center, a deck of cards still scattered across its surface. Hastings examined the room, his eyes scanning for clues. He checked the windows, locked with no sign of tampering. The door led to the main corridor, just a short walk from the housekeeper's office in the west wing where the study was located. 10 minutes, Hastings thought. Plenty of time for Victor to slip out, grab the key, and reach the study. He knelt, by the table inspecting the floor for any trace of Victor's movements. A faint smudge of ash caught his eye. Cigar ash, perhaps, from Victor's ever-present smokes. It was near the door, as if dropped in haste. Hastings' heart quickened. It wasn't much, but it was something. He pocketed a sample in his handkerchief, intending to compare it to Victor's cigars later. As he stood, he heard a soft rustle behind him. Turning, he saw Clara Beaumont in the doorway, her crimson gown catching the light, her fan moving lazily. "Captain Hastings," she said, her voice a teasing purr. "Playing detective again? You're quite relentless." Hastings straightened, his cheeks warming under her gaze. "Just doing my part, Miss Beaumont. You were here last night during the card game. Did you notice Victor leave? Jenkins said he was gone for 10 minutes. Clara's fan paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Oh, Victor's always coming and going. He's like a caged lion, that man. But 10 minutes? I suppose it's possible. I was focused on my cards, you see." Her evasiveness only fueled Hastings' suspicions. "And that argument I overheard about the will, what was that really about?" Clara's laugh was light, but her eyes were sharp. "My, you are nosy, Captain. It was nothing, just Victor, being his usual dramatic self. He's always fretting about money. You'd think he was destitute the way he carries on." Hastings made a mental note. Clara was covering for Victor, or perhaps hiding her own involvement. He decided to push harder. "Miss Beaumont, if you know something about Victor or anyone else, you'd best tell me. This is a murder investigation, not a parlor game." Clara's smile faded, her expression cooling. "Careful, Captain. You're playing a dangerous game yourself, poking into other people's secrets. Not everyone appreciates it." She turned and glided out, leaving Hastings with a sense of unease. Her words were a warning, but they only strengthened his resolve. He returned to the drawing room, where Poirot was now questioning Dr. Grayson. The doctor's reserved demeanor was as impenetrable as ever, his hands clasped behind his back. his spectacles glinting in the firelight. "I assure you, Monsieur Poirot," Grayson was saying. "I was in the library until 11, then checked Reginald's medication. I saw no one in the corridor, and I heard no footsteps." Poirot's voice was smooth, probing. "And the housekeeper's office, Doctor? You passed it on your way to Lord Ashford's room, yes? The door was ajar, you said. Did you see the key?" Grayson's lips tightened. "No, I didn't. I had no reason to look. My concern was Reginald's health, not household keys. Hastings, unable to resist, jumped in. But you were near. The study around 11:30, Doctor, same as the footsteps Emily heard. And the shadow Mary saw, tall, like you. Can you explain that?" Grayson's eyes flicked to Hastings, a flash of irritation crossing his face. "I've told you, Captain. I saw nothing. I was in and out of Reginald's room in minutes. If there was a shadow, it wasn't me." Poirot's gaze lingered on Grayson, but he said nothing, merely nodding. Hastings, however, felt a thrill of suspicion. Grayson's story was too neat, too convenient. He added it to his mental tally. Victor, Clara, and now Grayson, all with questionable alibis, all with potential motives. Lady Eleanor was next, her composure as flawless as ever, though Hastings noticed a slight tremor in her hand as she set down her teacup. "Madame," Poirot said, "the handkerchief with the E. It could be yours or Mademoiselle Emily's. Can you shed light on this?" Lady Eleanor's smile was serene, but her eyes were guarded. "I have several handkerchiefs, Monsieur Poirot, but I don't recall losing one. And Emily, she's not one for wandering the grounds. Perhaps it belongs to a servant." Emily, overhearing, spoke up, her voice trembling. "It's not mine. I swear I was in my room all night." Hastings noted her panic, his suspicions shifting. Was Emily hiding something, or was she simply terrified? He glanced at Poirot, expecting a reaction, but the detective's face was a mask of calm. The interrogations continued, with Victor growing more defensive, Clara more evasive, and Lady Eleanor maintaining her icy poise. Japp returned, his face grim. "No luck with the pawn search, just the handkerchief, but I've got the staff checking their inventories for anything missing. This killer's clever, Poirot, but they'll slip up." Poirot nodded, his eyes half closed in thought. "They are clever, Inspector, but not infallible. The key, the handkerchief, the word trust, they are breadcrumbs leading us somewhere. We must follow with care." Hastings, growing impatient, decided to take matters into his own hands. While Poirot and Japp discussed the handkerchief, he slipped out to the housekeeper's office, a small room off the main hall. The door was indeed ajar, as Grayson had said, and the drawer where the master key was kept bore faint scratches around the lock, signs of tampering. Hastings' heart raced. Someone had picked the lock, and Victor, with his shady business dealings. Chapter 8. The Hidden Letter. The evening shadows deepened over Ravenwood Manor, cloaking its grand halls in a somber hush that seemed to echo the weight of Lord Reginald Ashford's murder. The air was thick with suspicion, each creak of the floorboards and flicker of candlelight amplifying the tension that gripped the household. Captain Arthur Hastings sat in a quiet corner of the drawing room, his notepad now a battle-worn companion, its pages filled with scribbled clues. Emily's footsteps, Victor Crane's shaky alibi, the master key found in the garden, the monogrammed handkerchief, and the cryptic word trust. His clash with Hercule Poirot earlier that day had left him resolute, determined to pursue his theory about Victor with or without the detective's approval. Hastings was no longer content to be Poirot's shadow. He would prove his mettle by uncovering the truth. Hercule Poirot, seated near the fireplace, was the epitome of calm precision. His small hands folded neatly over his waistcoat, his green eyes scanning the guests with an intensity that belied his serene demeanor. The fire cast a warm glow across his waxed mustache, but there was a sharpness in his gaze that suggested his mind was piecing together the puzzle with relentless focus. Inspector Japp, his face etched with fatigue, was in the hall, coordinating, with his constables to ensure the manor remained secure. The guests, Lady Eleanor Ashford, Victor Crane, Clara Beaumont, Dr. Harold Grayson and Emily Ashford were confined to the drawing room, their interactions strained, their glances guarded. Hastings's mind was a whirlwind of conviction. Victor Crane with his financial troubles, his argument with Clara, his absence from the card game and the cigar ash near the billiard room door was the linchpin of his theory. The master key, found in the garden, was surely Victor's attempt to stage an outsider's crime, and the handkerchief with the E could be a plant to implicate Emily or Lady Eleanor. But Hastings knew he needed more, something undeniable to present to Poirot and Japp. His clash with Poirot's methodical approach had only fueled his determination to act, to follow his instincts, and to prove his worth. As the guests sipped tea and murmured half-hearted pleasantries, Hastings decided to revisit the study. The room, now sealed except for official inspections, held the heart of the mystery, and he was certain it concealed more secrets. Slipping past the constable with a nod and a murmured excuse about fetching a forgotten item, he entered the study, the air heavy with the scent of dried ink and tragedy. The desk, still stained with blood and ink, stood as a grim centerpiece, the torn paper with trust lying beside it like a taunting riddle. Hastings' eyes roamed the room, searching for anything he might have missed. The bookshelves lined with leather-bound tomes seemed undisturbed, but he recalled Poirot's interest in the desk. Kneeling, he examined its underside, his fingers brushing against the smooth wood. His heart skipped as he felt a slight irregularity, a hidden catch, barely perceptible. With a gentle press, a small panel clicked open, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was a folded letter, its edges worn but intact, written in Lord Ashford's precise hand. Hastings' pulse raced as he unfolded it, his eyes scanning the text. The letter was incomplete, addressed to no one, and read, "My trust has been betrayed. He knows the truth, and the secret kept too long must be revealed. I cannot continue to—" The writing stopped abruptly, as if interrupted. Hastings' mind leapt to the possibilities. E. Emily or Eleanor. A secret betrayal, it tied to the word trust on the torn paper. This was the proof he needed, a clue that could break the case wide open. He hurried back to the drawing room, clutching the letter, his excitement barely contained. Poirot was questioning Lady Eleanor, his voice smooth but probing. "Madam, you spoke of your husband's health, his plans for the will. Did he ever mention a secret? Something that weighed upon him?" Lady Eleanor's fingers paused on her pearl necklace, her smile serene but strained. "Reginald was a private man, Monsieur Poirot. If he had secrets, he kept them to himself." Hastings couldn't wait. "Poirot, look at this," he said, thrusting the letter forward. "I found it in a hidden compartment in the desk. It mentions betrayal and E. It's got to be connected to the murder." The room fell silent, the guest's eyes turning to Hastings. Poirot took the letter, his expression unreadable as he scanned it. "Mon ami, you have done well," he said, his voice low but approving. "A hidden letter, incomplete yet full of meaning. This is a significant find." Inspector Japp, who had just returned, raised an eyebrow. "What's this, then?" "Another clue. Let's have a look." Poirot handed him the letter, his eyes never leaving Hastings. The letter, it speaks of betrayal, of a secret known by E. "It is a thread, Inspector, one we must follow with care." Hastings, buoyed by his discovery, pressed his case. "It's Emily, isn't it? Or Lady Eleanor? The handkerchief, the letter, they both point to E. And Victor's tied to it somehow, his motive, his absence from the card game. He must have known about this secret and acted to protect it." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Your theory, Hastings, it is bold, but it assumes much. The letter, it is a clue, but not a conclusion. We must question further, observe the reactions of those named by this E." Japp, reading the letter, nodded. "Right, let's start with the ladies. Lady Eleanor, Miss Emily. Any idea what this is about?" Lady Eleanor's composure held, but her eyes flickered with something, fear perhaps. I've no idea, Inspector. Reginald never spoke of such things to me. As for secrets, every family has them, don't they? Emily, her face pale, shook, her head vigorously. It's not me. I don't know any secrets. Uncle Reginald never told me anything like that. Hastings watched her closely, noting her panic. Was it genuine? Or was she hiding something? He glanced at Victor, whose face was flushed, his fists clenched. This is nonsense, Victor snapped. You're all grasping at straws. I was playing cards, I tell you. Clara Beaumont, lounging on her chaise, laughed softly. Oh, Victor, you do protest too much. And Captain Hastings, what a find. You're quite the sleuth, aren't you? Her teasing tone grated on Hastings, but he held his ground. I'm just following the evidence, Miss Beaumont. Unlike some, I'm not afraid to dig for the truth. Poirot's eyes gleamed with amusement. Bien joué, mon ami. Your discovery, it has stirred the pot, no? Let us see what bubbles to the surface. The interrogations resumed, with Poirot focusing on the letter's implications. He questioned Emily first, his voice gentle but probing. Mademoiselle, your uncle, he was close to you, yes? Did he ever speak of a betrayal, a secret within the family? Emily's hands twisted her handkerchief, her voice trembling. No, never. He was kind to me, but he didn't share his troubles. I don't know what that letter means. Hastings, watching her, felt a pang of doubt. Her fear seemed real, but could it be an act? He made a note to check her room later, perhaps for more handkerchiefs or other clues. Lady Eleanor was next, her poise unshaken despite the letter's implications. Monsieur Poirot, she said, if Reginald had a secret, he kept it well. I knew nothing of any betrayal. As for the E, it could mean anything. A business associate, perhaps, or even a misunderstanding. Hastings, unconvinced, whispered to Poirot, She's too calm, Poirot. And that necklace, she keeps fidgeting with it. It's a tell, I'm sure of it. Poirot's nod was subtle. You are observant, Hastings. The necklace, it is a small detail, but significant. We shall watch Madame closely. Dr. Grayson, questioned next, was as reserved as ever. I knew Reginald had a heart condition, he said, adjusting his spectacles. But secrets? No, he never confided in me beyond medical matters. Hastings pressed him. You were near the study around 11:30, Doctor, same as the footsteps in the shadow, and you passed the housekeeper's office where the key was kept. Did you see anything unusual? Grayson's lips tightened. I've told you, Captain, I saw nothing. I was focused on my duties. Poirot's gaze lingered on the doctor, but he said nothing, merely nodding. Hastings, however, felt a surge of suspicion. Grayson's evasiveness, his proximity to the crime scene, it was all too convenient. He added it to his growing list of clues, his theory now encompassing a possible conspiracy involving Victor, Clara, and perhaps Grayson or Lady Eleanor, as the evening wore on. Japp organized a search of the guests' rooms, hoping to find more evidence tied to the handkerchief or the letter. Hastings, eager to contribute, volunteered to assist, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. In Victor's room, he found a box of cigars matching the ash from the billiard room, but nothing more incriminating. Clara's room yielded a collection of fans and scripts, but no handkerchiefs with an E. Lady Eleanor's room was impeccably tidy, her jewelry box filled with pearls and diamonds, but nothing suspicious. Emily's room, however, held a small stack of handkerchiefs, none monogrammed, though one had a faint stain that could be mud or blood. Hastings reported his findings. To Poirot, his excitement barely contained. The stain on Emily's handkerchief. It could be a match for the one in the pond. And Victor's cigars. They're the same as the ash I found. It's all coming together, Poirot. Poirot's smile was encouraging but cautious. You are building a case, mon ami, and it is impressive. But the handkerchief, the letter, they suggest a broader picture. We must not focus solely on Monsieur Crane, lest we miss the truth. Chapter 9. The Nighttime Revelation. The night had fallen heavily over Ravenwood Manor, its darkness seeping into the grand halls like ink spreading across a blotter. The murder of Lord Reginald Ashford had transformed the estate into a crucible, of secrets where every shadow seemed to whisper of betrayal. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by his bedroom window, the cool glass pressed against his palm, his mind a tumult of clues and convictions. The footsteps Emily had heard, Victor Crane's shaky alibi, the master key found in the garden, the monogrammed handkerchief, the hidden letter with its mention of E and betrayal, all fueled his determination to prove his theory that Victor was the killer. His clash with Hercule Poirot's methodical approach had only strengthened his resolve to follow his instincts, to show that he could unravel the mystery without relying on the detective's little gray cells. Hercule Poirot, in his own room down the corridor, was likely poring over the same clues, his mind weaving them into a tapestry only he could fully comprehend. The drawing room, where the guests had been confined earlier, was now quiet, the fire reduced to glowing embers. Inspector Japp had retired to the library to review his notes, leaving a constable to patrol the manor's halls. The guests, Lady Eleanor Ashford, Victor Crane, Clara Beaumont, Dr. Harold Grayson, and Emily Ashford, had been sent to their rooms under strict orders not to leave, but the air remained thick with suspicion, as if the murderer were still among them, watching, waiting. Hastings, unable to sleep, paced his room, his notepad open on the bedside table. His theory about Victor was solid. The man's financial troubles, his absence from the card game, the cigar ash in the billiard room, the master key's discovery in the garden, all pointed to him. The hidden letter, with its mention of E and betrayal, was a complication, but Hastings suspected it implicated Emily or Lady Eleanor as accomplices, perhaps manipulated by Victor to cover his tracks. The handkerchief with the E found in the pond was another piece, possibly planted to mislead. Hastings was determined to find more evidence, to prove his case to Poirot and Japp, even if it meant defying the detective's cautious methods. As the clock struck 11, a faint sound caught his ear, a soft creak like a floorboard under cautious steps. His heart quickened, memories of Emily's footsteps flashing through his mind. He grabbed his dressing gown, slipped on his shoes, and eased open his door, peering into the darkened corridor. The west wing was silent save for the distant tick of a grandfather clock, but a flicker of movement at the far end caught his eye, a shadowy figure moving toward the library. Hastings' pulse raced. Could it be the killer, returning to hide evidence? Or perhaps one of the guests unable to resist the pull of the mystery? He crept forward, keeping to the shadows, his footsteps muffled on the thick carpet. The figure paused at the library door, then slipped inside, the door closing softly behind them. Hastings hesitated, weighing his options. Poirot would urge caution, observation, but Hastings was done waiting. He needed answers, and he needed them now. He reached the library door and eased it open, the hinges silent thanks to the manor's meticulous upkeep. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp on a reading table, its glow casting long shadows across shelves of leather-bound books. The figure was Emily Ashford, her small frame hunched over a table, a thick volume open before her. Her hands moved quickly, flipping pages, her face pale and tense in the lamplight. "Miss Ashford," Hastings said, keeping his voice low but firm. "What are you doing here?" Emily gasped, nearly dropping the book, her eyes wide with panic. "Captain Hastings, I couldn't sleep. I was just looking for something to read." Hastings stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "At this hour? In the library? Come now, Miss Ashford. You're not here for a bedtime story. What are you looking for?" Emily's hands trembled, her voice barely audible. It's nothing, really. I thought Uncle Reginald kept journals, you see. I wanted to see if there was anything about the family, about why he was changing the will." Hastings' mind leapt to the hidden letter, its mention of E and betrayal. Could Emily be searching for proof, or trying to hide it? He softened his tone, hoping to coax the truth. "Miss Ashford, if you know something about your uncle's death, you must tell me. That letter we found, it mentioned E, and a secret. Is that why you're here?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. I don't know what it means, I swear I don't. But Uncle Reginald, he was upset lately, talking about the past, about things he regretted. I thought maybe his journals would explain. Hastings glanced at the book, a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Lord Ashford's precise handwriting. He took it from her gently, scanning the open page. It was dated a year earlier, detailing a dispute over an inheritance, a family scandal involving a stolen legacy. Emily, it read, must be protected, but the truth cannot stay buried forever. Hastings' heart raced. This was no coincidence. It tied to the letter to the word trust. Miss Ashford, he said, his voice urgent. This could be vital. Did your uncle ever mention a stolen inheritance? Or someone betraying him? Emily shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Not directly. He just said I deserved more than he could give, that he'd failed me. I didn't understand, but I thought the journals might tell me why he was killed. Hastings' mind churned. Emily's story rang true, but her presence here in the dead of night suggested she knew more than she was letting on. He tucked the journal under his arm, determined to show it to Poirot. Come with me, Miss Ashford. We need to tell Poirot about this. It's too important to keep to yourself. Emily hesitated, then nodded, her shoulders slumping. They left the library, Hastings keeping a wary eye on the corridor. The manor was eerily silent, the constable's patrol nowhere in sight. As they reached the drawing room, Hastings paused, hearing a faint murmur of voices from within. He signaled Emily to stay quiet and crept closer, peering through the crack in the door. Inside, Lady Eleanor and Dr. Grayson stood close, their voices low but intense. We can't let it come out, Grayson was saying, his spectacles glinting in the firelight. If they find it, everything's ruined. Lady Eleanor's voice was sharp, almost desperate. They won't, Harold. We've been careful. Just keep your nerve. Hastings' pulse quickened. What were they hiding? Was it tied to the letter, the inheritance, the murder? He turned to Emily, who was trembling, her eyes wide with fear. Stay here, he whispered. I'm going to get Poirot. He hurried to Poirot's room, knocking softly. The detective opened the door, his nightcap slightly askew but his eyes alert. Mon ami, what brings you at this hour? He said, his voice calm but curious. Hastings thrust the journal forward, his words tumbling out. Poirot, I caught Emily in the library, looking through Lord Ashford's journals. This one mentions a stolen inheritance and protecting Emily. And I overheard Lady Eleanor and Dr. Grayson in the drawing room. They're hiding something, talking about keeping it secret. It's all connected. The letter, the journal, Victor's motive. I'm sure of it. Poirot took the journal, his eyes scanning the page with rapid precision. Très intéressant, Hastings. You have been busy, no? This journal, it is a significant find. And the conversation you overheard, it suggests a conspiracy, perhaps. We must proceed with care. Hastings, buoyed by Poirot's approval, pressed on. It's got to be Victor, with Lady Eleanor and Grayson involved. The letters E could be Eleanor, and the journal mentions Emily. They're all tied to this inheritance scandal. Poirot's mustache twitched, his smile enigmatic. Your theory, mon ami, it grows more intricate. But we must not leap too far. The journal, it speaks of protection, of regret. The conversation, it hints at a secret. But are they the secret of the murder, or something else? We shall question Mademoiselle Emily and confront Madame and the doctor. They returned to the drawing room, Emily trailing behind, her face pale. Lady Eleanor and Dr. Grayson were still there. Their conversation halted as Poirot and Hastings entered. Poirot held up the journal, his voice calm but commanding. Madame, Doctor, we have found something most curious. A journal, speaking of a stolen inheritance and a need to protect Mademoiselle Emily. And my friend Hastings, he has overheard a conversation that suggests you are hiding something. Care to explain? Lady Eleanor's composure faltered, her hand tightening on her necklace. Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, I know nothing of journals or secrets. Reginald was a private man. If he wrote such things, they were his alone. Grayson's voice was clipped, his spectacles glinting. I agree, I was merely discussing private matters with Lady Eleanor. Nothing to do with the murder. Hastings, unable to contain himself, stepped forward. Private matters? You said everything's ruined if it comes out. What's it, Doctor? The inheritance? The betrayal mentioned in the letter? Grayson's face reddened, but he held his ground. You're mistaken, Captain. It was a personal matter, not a crime. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice soft but probing. And yet, Doctor, the journal, the letter, they point to a secret within this house. Mademoiselle Emily, you were seeking answers in the library. What did you hope to find? Emily's voice trembled, her eyes darting to Lady Eleanor. I just wanted to understand why Uncle Reginald was so upset. He said things about the family, about mistakes he'd made. Chapter 10. Poirot's trap, the morning mist clung to Ravenwood Manor like a shroud, its gray tendrils curling around the estate's red brick facade, softening the harsh edges of a house steeped in tragedy. The murder of Lord Reginald Ashford had turned the once opulent manor into a battleground of secrets, where every word, every glance carried the weight of suspicion. Captain Arthur Hastings stood in the drawing room, his notepad now a tattered testament to his relentless pursuit of the truth. The clues he'd gathered, Emily's footsteps, Victor Crane's shaky alibi, the master key in the garden, the monogrammed handkerchief, the hidden letter, and Lord Ashford's journal, had fueled his conviction that Victor was the killer, possibly with Lady Eleanor or Dr. Grayson as accomplices. His nighttime discovery of Emily in the library and the overheard conversation between Eleanor and Grayson had only deepened his resolve to prove his theory, even if it meant defying Hercule Poirot's methodical approach. Poirot himself was a study in calm precision, seated by the fireplace, his small hands folded over his waistcoat, his green eyes scanning the guests with a sharpness that belied his serene demeanor. The fire crackled, casting flickering light across the faces of Lady Eleanor Ashford, Victor Crane, Clara Beaumont, Dr. Harold Grayson, and Emily Ashford, each of whom seemed to shrink under the weight of the investigation. Inspector Japp, his face lined with exhaustion, was in the hall, barking orders to his constables to maintain the manor's security. The atmosphere was electric, as if the very air awaited a spark to ignite the truth. Hastings' clash with Poirot's methods had left him more determined than ever. His theory about Victor was robust. The man's financial troubles, his absence from the card game, the cigar ash in the billiard room, the master key's discovery, all pointed to him. The hidden letter's mention of E and betrayal, the journal's reference to a stolen inheritance, and the handkerchief with an E suggested a broader conspiracy, perhaps involving Lady Eleanor or Emily. Hastings was certain that Victor had orchestrated the murder to secure his stake in Ashford's will, and he was ready to push for a breakthrough, even if Poirot preferred to linger over cryptic details like the spilled ink and the word trust. As the guests sipped their morning tea, their movements stiff and guarded, Poirot rose, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his tone commanding yet measured, the time has come to advance. Our inquiry, the murder of Lord Ashford, it is a puzzle, but Hercule Poirot, he does not permit puzzles to remain unsolved. Today we shall reenact the events of that fatal night to see what truths emerge. Hastings' heart quickened. A reenactment? This was unexpected, even for Poirot. He leaned closer, his notepad at the ready, as the detective continued. Each of you will recount your movements precisely as they occurred. We shall walk the paths you took, stand where you stood, and perhaps the shadows of the past will reveal the killer among us. Japp, re-entering the room, raised an eyebrow. A reenactment, Poirot. Sounds like a bit of theater, but I'll play along. Let's see if it shakes something loose. Victor Crane, pacing by the window, snorted. This is ridiculous. I've told you I was playing cards. You're wasting time. Clara Beaumont, lounging on her chaise, fluttered her fan with a mocking smile. Oh, Victor, don't be so tiresome. I, for one, am dying to see Monsieur Poirot's little performance. Lady Eleanor's composure held, though her fingers toyed with her pearl necklace. If it will help find my husband's killer, I'm Willing to cooperate. Dr. Grayson adjusted his spectacles, his voice clipped. I see no harm in it, though I doubt it will change my account. Emily, huddled in her corner, looked up with wide, anxious eyes. Do I have to? I don't want to go near the study again. Poirot's smile was gentle but firm. Mademoiselle Emily, your presence, it is essential. Your footsteps, they are a key to the puzzle. Come, we shall begin. Hastings followed the group as they moved to the West Wing corridor, his mind racing. A reenactment was a bold move, one that could expose discrepancies in the guests' alibis. He was particularly eager to watch Victor, whose absence from the card game was a critical gap. He whispered to Poirot, This is a clever trap, Poirot. If Victor slips up, we'll have him. Poirot's eyes twinkled. A trap, oui, mon ami, but for whom? Observe closely, Hastings. The guilty, they reveal themselves in the smallest details. The reenactment began with the card game in the billiard room. Victor, Clara, Jenkins the butler, and Mary the maid took their places around the table, recreating the scene. Jenkins dealt a hand of bridge, his movements precise, while Clara laughed and fanned herself, her poise theatrical. Victor, however, was visibly tense, his cigar smoldering in an ashtray. We played like this, he said, his voice gruff. I stepped out for air around 11, back in 10 minutes. That's it. Hastings, standing by the door, noted the time. 10 minutes, Mr. Crane. Jenkins said it was closer to 15. Where exactly did you go? Victor's face reddened. I told you, for air. I walked to the terrace, smoked a bit, came back, asked Clara. She saw me return. Clara's fan paused, her smile cool. You were gone a while, Victor, but yes, you came back. Rather flushed, as I recall. Hastings' pulse quickened. A discrepancy, however small, was a crack in Victor's alibi. He glanced at Poirot, expecting a reaction, but the detective's face was impassive, his eyes fixed on the table. Next, they moved to the West Wing, where Emily recounted her evening. She stood outside her room, her voice trembling as she described hearing footsteps around 11:30. They were quick coming from that way, she said, pointing toward the main hall. I locked my door and stayed inside until the scream. Hastings, watching her closely, noted her fear seemed genuine, but he couldn't shake the suspicion that she knew more. The journal's mention of protecting her, the letters E. Was she hiding a secret, or was she a pawn in someone else's game? Dr. Grayson was positioned near the library, where he claimed to have been reviewing journals until 11, then checking Lord Ashford's medication. I passed the housekeeper's office, he said, his tone clipped. The door was ajar, but I saw nothing unusual. Poirot's voice was soft but probing. And the corridor, Doctor? Was it empty when you walked to Lord Ashford's room? Grayson hesitated, his spectacles glinting. Yes, empty. I was only gone a moment. Hastings seized on the pause. A moment, Doctor? That's when Emily heard footsteps and Mary saw a shadow. You're tall, like the shadow. Can you be sure you saw no one? Grayson's lips tightened. I'm sure, Captain. I was focused on my duties. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, merely nodding. Hastings, however, felt a surge of suspicion. Grayson's hesitation was telling, and his proximity to the study made him a viable suspect or witness. Lady Eleanor, standing by her room in the East Wing, recounted her evening with serene precision. I was reading in my room, heard nothing until the scream. My room is far from the study, so I wouldn't have heard footsteps. Hastings, unconvinced, whispered to Poirot. She's too calm, Poirot. And that conversation I overheard with Grayson, they're hiding something. The letters E could be her. Poirot's nod was subtle. You are observant, mon ami. Madame's calm, it is a mask, perhaps. We shall see. The reenactment culminated in the study, where Poirot had the group pause outside the sealed door. Here, he said, his voice low. Lord Ashford met his end. The door was locked, the key missing, the window ajar but unused. The ink spilled, the paper torn with trust. Let us imagine the moment. Who stood here? Who held the letter opener? The guests shifted uneasily. their eyes darting to one another. Victor's face was flushed. Clara's fan moved faster. Lady Eleanor's hand tightened on her necklace. Grayson's spectacles glinted and Emily's breath hitched. Hastings, watching closely, felt the tension like a taut wire, ready to snap. Poirot turned to Clara. Mademoiselle Beaumont, you were playing cards, yes? But you saw Monsieur Crane return flushed, you say. Did you notice anything else, perhaps a stain on his clothes or a change in his manner? Clara's eyes widened briefly, but her smile held. Flushed, yes, but that's Victor. Always, in a huff. No stains, no secrets, just a man who can't sit still. Hastings, catching the flicker in her eyes, pressed her. You're sure, Miss Beaumont? You and Victor argued about the will. Maybe you saw something you're not telling. Clara's fan snapped shut, her voice sharp. Captain Hastings, you're persistent, I'll give you that. But I saw nothing. Victor's no saint, but a murderer? I doubt it. Poirot's gaze shifted to Victor. And you, Monsieur Crane, 10 minutes, 15, it matters little. Where did you walk precisely? Victor's jaw clenched. The terrace, like I said. I smoked, looked at the stars, came back. That's it. Hastings. Couldn't resist. And the cigar ash I found by the billiard room door? Your brand, Mr. Crane, care to explain that? Victor's face reddened further. I smoke everywhere, doesn't mean I killed anyone. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The ash, it is a small detail, but significant. Let us move inside. The constable unlocked the study and the group entered, the air heavy with the memory of violence. The desk, stained with ink and blood, stood as a grim centerpiece, the torn paper with trust, a silent accusation. Poirot positioned himself by the desk, his hands tracing the edge. Here, Lord Ashford sat. The killer entered, perhaps with the master key. Chapter 11. The Crumbling Alibi. The afternoon sun struggled to pierce the heavy clouds over Ravenwood Manor, casting a muted gray light across the estate's sprawling grounds. Inside, the air was thick with tension, as if the very walls held their breath, awaiting the next revelation in the murder of Lord Reginald Ashford. Captain Arthur Hastings stood in the West Wing corridor, just outside the study, his notepad a worn companion filled with clues. Emily's footsteps, Victor Crane's absence from the card game, the master key found in the garden, the monogrammed handkerchief, the hidden letter, Lord Ashford's journal, and the cigar ash on the terrace. His theory that Victor was the killer, possibly with Lady Eleanor or Dr. Grayson as accomplices, was stronger than ever, and the reenactment had exposed cracks in the guests' alibis. Hastings was determined to press his advantage, to prove to Hercule Poirot that his instincts could rival the detective's little gray cells. Hercule Poirot, seated in the drawing room, was the picture of calm precision, his small hands folded over his waistcoat, his green eyes scanning the guests with a sharpness that belied his serene demeanor. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across the faces of Lady Eleanor Ashford, Victor Crane, Clara Beaumont, Dr. Harold Grayson, and Emily Ashford, each of whom seemed to shrink under the weight of Poirot's scrutiny. Inspector Japp, his face etched with the strain of a relentless investigation, was in the library, reviewing the coroner's report with a constable. The manor's atmosphere was charged, the reenactment's revelations hanging like a storm cloud, ready to break. Hastings' clash with Poirot's methodical approach had left him more resolute than ever. The reenactment had confirmed Victor's absence from the card game was longer than he'd claimed, and the cigar ash on the terrace matched his brand. The ink bottle's deliberate spill, the hidden letters' mention of E and betrayal, and the journal's reference to a stolen inheritance all suggested a complex web, with Victor at its center. Hastings suspected Lady Eleanor and Grayson's secretive conversation was tied to the same scandal, perhaps a motive for their complicity. He was determined to exploit the cracks in Victor's alibi, to find the proof that would force a confession. As the guests gathered for lunch, their movements stiff and their conversation strained, Poirot rose, his voice cutting through the clink of cutlery. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his tone measured but commanding, "the reenactment, it has shown us much. The alibis, they are not so solid as they seemed. Today we shall probe deeper to see which threads unravel. Monsieur Crane, perhaps you would care to begin? Victor, seated at the table, slammed down his fork, his face flushed. This is harassment, Poirot. I've told you, I was on the terrace for 10 minutes, no more. You've got nothing on me. Hastings, standing by the door, seized the moment. 15 minutes, Mr. Crane, according to Jenkins. And I found cigar ash on the terrace, your brand fresh. Care to explain why you were so flushed when you returned? Victor's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to Clara. I told you I smoked. The ash means nothing. You're grasping at straws, Captain. Clara, sipping her wine, smiled mockingly. Oh, Victor, you do make a fine suspect. But really, Captain Hastings, cigar ash? It's hardly a noose. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with amusement. The ash, it is a small detail, mon ami, but significant. And the time, Monsieur Crane, it is not precise. Let us revisit your walk. The terrace, it is near the west wing, yes? Close to the housekeeper's office, where the key was kept. Victor's face reddened further. I didn't go near that office. I stayed on the terrace, looked at the gardens, came back, that's it. Hastings, sensing weakness, pressed on. Close enough to slip inside, grab the key and head to the study. 15 minutes is plenty of time, Mr. Crane. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. Patience, Hastings. Monsieur Crane, he protests, but the truth, it is in the details. Let us move to Mademoiselle Emily. Your footsteps, they were heard near the study. Did you see anything, perhaps through your door? Emily, her hands twisting a napkin, shook her head, her voice trembling. No, Monsieur Poirot, I was in my room reading. I heard the footsteps, locked my door and stayed inside until the scream. Hastings, watching her closely, noted her. Panic seemed genuine, but the journal's mention of protecting her nagged at him. Miss Ashford, he said, the journal said your uncle wanted to protect you. Was there a family secret he was shielding you from? Emily's eyes widened, tears brimming. I don't know. He never told me anything like that. He just said I deserved better, that he'd failed me. Lady Eleanor, seated beside her, placed a hand on Emily's arm, her voice serene but strained. Monsieur Poirot, Emily is a sensitive girl. Reginald was protective, but he kept his troubles private. This talk of secrets is distressing her. Poirot's gaze lingered on Lady Eleanor, his voice soft but probing. And yet, Madame, the letter we found, it speaks of betrayal, of an E, who knows the truth. Could it be you, perhaps, or Mademoiselle Emily? Lady Eleanor's fingers tightened on her necklace, her smile faltering. I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I know of no such betrayal. Reginald's letter must refer to something else, a business matter, perhaps. Hastings whispered to Poirot. She's hiding something, Poirot. That conversation I overheard with Grayson. They were worried about something coming out. It's tied to the letter. Poirot's nod was subtle. You are observant, mon ami. Madame's composure, it is a mask. We shall peel it away. Dr. Grayson, adjusting his spectacles, spoke up, his tone clipped. This speculation is pointless. I was in the library, then checked Reginald's medication. I saw no one, heard nothing. The letters E could be anyone, or no one. Hastings, unconvinced, pressed him. You were near the study, Doctor. Same as the footsteps and the shadow Mary saw. And you passed the housekeeper's office where the key was kept. That's a lot of coincidences. Grayson's lips tightened, his voice sharp. Coincidences, Captain, not evidence. I had no reason to harm Reginald. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, merely nodding. Hastings, however, felt a surge of suspicion. Grayson's evasiveness, his proximity to the crime scene, it was all too convenient. He added it to his mental tally, his theory now, encompassing Victor as the killer, with Lady Eleanor and Grayson possibly complicit in a cover-up. Japp returned, his face grim. Right, Poirot, I've got something. The coroner found traces of digitalis in Ashford's blood, more than his usual dose. Could be accidental, but it's suspicious given his heart condition. Hastings' heart leapt. Digitalis, Grayson's responsibility. He glanced at Poirot, expecting a reaction, but the detective's face was impassive. Très intéressant, Inspector, Poirot said. The digitalis, it suggests a deeper plan. Dr. Grayson, you prescribed this medication, yes? Grayson's spectacles glinted, his voice steady. I did, but the dose was precise. If there was an overdose, it wasn't my doing. Someone could have tampered with his supply. Hastings seized the opportunity. Tampered? You checked his medication that night, Doctor. Maybe you slipped in an extra dose to weaken him before the stabbing. Grayson's face reddened, but he held his ground. That's absurd, Captain. I was ensuring his health, not harming him. Poirot's voice cut through the tension, smooth and calm. The digitalis, it is a clue we must pursue. Let us examine Lord Ashford's room, where the medication was kept. The group moved to Ashford's bedroom, a stately chamber with heavy drapes and a four-poster bed. A small table held a bottle of digitalis, its cap slightly askew. Poirot examined it, his magnifying glass hovering over the label. The bottle, it is not sealed properly, a small matter but significant. Who had access to this room? Lady Eleanor spoke up, her voice steady. Only Reginald, myself, and Dr. Grayson. The servants cleaned during the day, but no one else came here. Hastings, inspecting the bottle, noticed a faint smudge on the glass, possibly a fingerprint. Poirot, look at this. Could be a print. If it's not Ashford's, or Grayson's, we've got our killer. Poirot's eyes gleamed, a rare flash of approval. Bien observé, Hastings. The print, it may tell a story. Inspector, can your men examine it? Japp nodded, summoning a constable to collect the bottle. Good catch, Hastings. If we get a match, we're one step closer. Hastings felt a surge of pride. His observation had caught Poirot's attention, and it strengthened his case against Victor. If the print was Victor's, it would tie him to the digitalis, perhaps a backup plan to ensure Ashford's death. He whispered to Poirot, if it's Victor's print, we've got him. He could have slipped in here during his walk and tampered with the bottle. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Possible, mon ami, but we must not assume. The print, it may belong to another, or to no one. We shall see. The investigation continued, with Poirot questioning the staff about access to Ashford's room. Jenkins confirmed that the room was locked at night, but the master key could have opened it. Mary, the maid, hesitated when asked if she'd seen anyone near the room, her eyes darting to Victor. I saw Mr. Crane in the main hall, sir, around 11. He was heading toward the west wing. Hastings' heart raced. The west wing? That's near Ashford's room in the study. What was he doing there, Mr. Crane? Victor's face flushed, his voice rising. I was lost, all right. This place is a maze. I was looking for the terrace. Took a wrong turn. Clara laughed, her fan fluttering. Lost, Victor? You've been here?